Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our third Make a Difference in the Life of a Child webinar series. And we are just so thrilled that you are joining us today. And we're so excited to have Sara, who's here with us, and one of our very, very favorite foster parents. And I'll let Sara introduce herself in just a second here. But my name is Kaylee, and I am the Director of Care to Foster, which is an initiative of fostering great ideas. And I'm also a foster parent. I'm just so excited to allow Sara to share her story with y'all today and just give a little bit of an overview of what fostering looks like in South Carolina and what might be your first steps to getting started. So Sara, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and some of your fostering story?
Yes, my husband and I have two biological daughters, twins, who were 9 years old when we started fostering. And we've actually had 9 foster children through our home in just under 2.5 years we've been fostering.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to have you here today, and we're just going to go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about um, what this process looks like, because there's some new changes to the foster care licensing process in South Carolina, and there's also some really exciting things happening. So we're thrilled to have y'all with us today. So what we're going to be doing is really just a general overview. So Care to Foster does some recruiting and some supporting of foster parents, but we do not license foster parents. Our goal is to help you find the agency that's going to be the best fit for you. We can do that through a phone call, through chat, through connecting you with one of our wonderful foster parent ambassadors, if you want to talk about their experiences, but really to get a more detailed idea of what your steps are going to be, you're going to want to connect directly with a licensing agency. So what you can expect of our time together today is really basically we're going to try and answer some of those most frequently asked questions. We're going to try and address some of the main barriers that we see in families that are considering foster care, help you understand a little bit of the licensing process, again, just kind of in a general way, but also help you understand what to expect as a foster family. Of course, Sara and I have been fostering for similar amounts of time, but our experiences have been different. So nobody's story is going to be exactly the same, but we're going to help you understand, what might you expect from that, from the getting started point to getting your first placement and just kind of embarking on this journey of foster care. Because Sara, I don't know about you, but it was kind of scary for me, a little bit uncertain, and I just didn't know much about foster care. What about you?
I actually knew nothing about foster care and did not know any foster families, and still don't have any friends who foster other than folks who I've become friends with through the foster care community. So it's very scary when you don't know anything.
Right. And so that's why one of our primary goals is also going to be to connect you with resources, or ideas for support, because that is so critical to being a successful foster family, to thriving and persisting in fostering. So we want to make sure that we're getting you connected with the opportunities and resources that are going to benefit you now as you're considering, and later as you get started. So let's go ahead and jump in. I think for so many of us, the question becomes, what is the need? Or really more honestly, am I needed? What role can I play in foster care? And we know that there are over 4,000 kids in the South Carolina foster care system at any given time. And there's only about 2,865 foster families. So that means that there is a gap between the number of families and the number of kids needing a home. That being said, we need about 1,600 more foster families to stand in the gap to meet that need. And of course, we understand that the needs of the child welfare system, the pain points of foster care are not all going to be solved if we just simply solve this math problem of more foster families. But what a great place to start with every kid having a home, for whatever time is that's needed, and having a home available for them in their county, having a home available for them that meets their specific needs. So whether that's a teen, who maybe needs some certain resources, or a sibling group of 4 kids that don't want to be separated from each other. We want to make sure that we are doing our part to spread awareness. Not everyone can foster, but everyone can do something, and we're going to tell you what that something might be for you today too.
I have an example, Kaylee.
Yeah.
There was a foster family of 5, and we were caring for 2 of the siblings, and they had 3 others. And these kids, because of the shortage of homes, these kids were spread from Florence to Greenville, Richland, Lexington, Kershaw counties, 5 different counties, at different points in time during these children's time in care. That's a lot of travel to see each other. And that's simply because they couldn't find foster homes in the county, in the home county, to place all these children.
Right. And we don't want that to be the reason that these kids are separated. If there is any possible way for family to stay together, for those siblings to maintain those sibling bonds by living together in a home, that is typically what is sought after, and fought for as they are making those placements. Because how sweet are those sibling bonds, when they do get to be together. So like we were saying, Sarah and I both, we didn't really know much about foster care before we jumped in, kind of jumped into the deep end. And I think that can be really scary for a lot of people. There may be a lot of reasons that you're here at the table that you're considering foster care. So you might have a different range of knowledge or information about fostering. Uh, you know, a lot of what we learn is through the media, maybe TV shows or movies, that show a certain image of what foster care is like, or what adoption is like. Maybe through news stories that are sensationalized, or uncommon cases. Maybe what you know about foster care is from growing up, and some of those things might have changed, or just basic myths and misconceptions, and maybe even misunderstandings. So the more information you have about what foster care is and what it isn't, the better prepared you're going to be to decide if this is right for you and your family at this particular time. So one of the things that I think is really important to understand: who are these children and why are they coming into care? So children are placed in foster care through no fault of their own. These are not children who were misbehaving. This is, a family is not currently able to care for them safely or care for them well within their own home at this particular time. So foster parents really are this temporary place, or they are meant to be this temporary, safe place for children to receive care and healing, resources and services, while the family, the parents, work a treatment plan to make sure that their home is safe for those children to return to. Because the goal of foster care is always reunification, that the child might return to the biological family, whether that is the parents immediately, or a relative or close family friend, because those bonds that exist are so special and so sweet. And if you can preserve those as early as possible, that the children really are proven to thrive. Um, And Sara, I don't know, would you mind sharing a little bit about your pre-service licensing classes? You were a little bit surprised by this emphasis on foster care as being temporary. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about that and maybe why that was surprising to you, or what about that? What was the point of really
Yeah, just
getting home the point?
going into the licensing process really knowing nothing. But it's a very important distinction that fostering is temporary. And that is really hammered over and over again during the licensing process. They want to make sure that foster parents really understand that core definition of fostering means temporary care. And it's something that we talk to our biological children about every day before we had our first placement, as well as, you know, throughout the first year of our first sibling placements, that we are caring for these children for as long as they need us. Not as long as we want them to be here, but as long as they need us. And we are willing to fill that gap, to stand in for those parents and give them the time that they need before these children could be reunified. I was very surprised the day of training when they talked about shared parenting, and that foster parents can be great mentors. Sometimes one of the first healthy adult role models that some of these parents have witnessed. And so there's a great opportunity that it doesn't always work, it's not appropriate in every situation, but when it is appropriate, if the foster parents are willing, there's a great opportunity for them to serve as mentors for the birth parents. And set a good example and talk to them about important adult things and decisions, and make sure that they're getting on the right path and doing what they need to do. And it's great. It's an opportunity really to heal an entire family and not just care for the kids in our own home in that kind of more closed setting.
Right. And Sara, you've had some really cool experiences connecting with those parents in some really sweet ways. So I love hearing that part of your story as well. And that's a great segue. I think that, you know, that shouldn't be surprising that foster care is temporary, and that shared parenting or commitment to championing those biological parents, you know, that shouldn't be something we learn when we show up to training. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're having this conversation, so that you are aware of what foster care really is about and what it's not about. So fostering, that's what we're really going to be talking about or focusing on today, that temporary care for a child, or children, you know, while the family works that treatment plan. Reunification is the ultimate goal, and you are working towards that with the child and championing those parents along the way. So we have foster to adopt up here, and that is in quotations because in South Carolina, this is not a pathway or a program that you can choose. You can't say, I only want to foster children that are likely to be able to be adopted. That is just not an option in South Carolina. So going into it knowing that that is not an option that you can choose. You can choose foster care or you can choose adoption, and both are very valuable. Both foster and adoptive parents are very needed. You know, I hear this a lot. My friends told me, you know, I want to adopt. Fostering is the easiest way to do that. I don't necessarily believe that's true, or fostering is the cheapest way to adopt. I think we really need to reevaluate our motivations and think about, you know, keeping our focus on the children. So just know that foster to adopt is not a checkbox that you can choose on your application. You can choose foster care or adoption. And adoption is an option. Adoption from foster care is an adoption option for many families. And what that looks like is you can become approved as an adoptive home, to be matched with a child that's waiting for a forever family or an adoptive family. So that means that those children have already had they are already legally free for adoption. The parental rights have been terminated. And in some cases, there are some high legal risk cases where maybe they haven't quite been terminated yet, but they are moving in that direction. And you can talk about that with Heartfelt Calling, which is the intake agency for DSS in terms of adoption. And of course, there's always private adoption options, including domestic and international. Those are often really good options for families wanting to adopt young children, because we know, while foster care is temporary, that doesn't always stay the plan. Sometimes a family is not able to be reunified, and those foster parents have the option to adopt those children once they become legally free. But the children who are legally free for adoption and waiting for to be matched with a family, those children are typically older. And you can look at the DSS website. You can look at the South Carolina Heart Gallery. You can look at Adopt US Kids. There are many ways that you can see who are the children that are waiting, to be matched with a family. So I just think it's helpful to have that information up front. Of course, there are many ways to growing your family, and we just want you to find the option that's going to be best for you.
Yes, I think that's a really important distinction, because so many of us have lumped foster and adoption together, and you hear
Right.
about those terms not interchangeably but closely linked. And of course they are linked, as Kaylee said, but they're truly not at all the same thing.
Right. There's very different goals to starting with foster care and starting with adoption. And neither of them are right or wrong for everybody. It really is about your family. Very similarly to some of the barriers to fostering. And Sarah's going to share a little bit about her story. And actually, Sara, would you mind, just before we go into some of the most common barriers, telling us a little bit about your family's motivations to foster, and kind of how you got started?
Our story is a little unusual in that fostering was my husband's idea. And you could have knocked me over with a feather the first night he brought it up. It just wasn't even on my radar. And so that was just beautiful insight, into his heart. And it didn't take really any convincing for me. Now, I did need some time to get my heart around it, my head around it, but very little time. Very little time. I was pretty much on board from the first night he mentioned it. But I wanted to research, I wanted to learn. And it turns out that he had been reading all these articles on children's brain development and the vast development that takes place. I think it's 80% of the brain is completely developed by the age of 3. And so if you can get a child into a loving, safe, caring environment where there's positive human touch, eye-to-eye contact, lots of being read to, floor time being played with, all these opportunities that we can offer to a child. That's really, it can get that child on the right path and make a lifelong impact, even though you may only have them for less than a year, 2 years, maybe. It really can have a lifelong impact on them. And that's why we do it. It's as simple as that, is we can make this small investment in this child, and it can help them for the rest of their life, prevent attachment disorders, which are really common among children in care. And those attachment disorders affect every relationship these children have for the rest of their lives: spouse, employer, neighbor, friendships, and certainly their relationships with their family if they develop attachment disorders as a child. So we can help prevent that in the children that we care for, and that's really important to us. So that was really our big motivation, is just reading the research and learning. Yes, foster care is temporary, but it can make a lifelong difference.
Yeah. So Sara mentioned that this was her husband's idea first. And often we do find that with couples, one person is really on board and maybe the other person needs to catch up. I love our friends John and Heidi say Heidi was the gas and John was the brakes. You know, that there usually is that give and take with families, especially if foster care or adoption, you know, those aren't things that have been part of conversations early on. You know, maybe this is something that's placed on your heart later on. You know, one person may be on board and the other isn't. One of the most common barriers we hear is, I want to foster, but my spouse isn't on board. Can I foster if they're not, you know, if we're not on the same page? And while, of course, you know, you can attempt, but that is not recommended. This fostering thing is challenging, and it's going to put some extra stress on your family and on all your relationships. Just like anytime you are trying something new, something hard, you're adding a child to your family dynamic. You know, this is going to add some pressure. And so we really encourage couples or families to really have some hard conversations um, around motivation, around interest, you know, so that you can get on the same page. And for each family, it's different. For Sara, she mentioned she just needed to do her research and, you know, learn a little bit more. It's not that she wasn't on board. It was, you know, she just needed to play catch up a little bit to where her husband already was. So for some families, that's, you know, one spouse just needs some information. Maybe they need some assurance that your family can carry that load of adding that additional piece to your life. You know, for every family, it's a little bit different, but having those hard conversations is a place to start. The next barrier we hear so often, and maybe Sara, you can speak a little bit to this, is how is foster care going to impact my biological children? Like I said, fostering is going to put stress on your family. It's going to test you and challenge you and, you know, provide opportunities for creative problem solving and communication, for family bonding. But of course, there's that stress of your kids learning to share their time, their home, the television remote, their parents' attention, the dinner table, all of those things. And Sara, would you mind sharing just kind of what your initial thoughts were as you kind of dove into this with having two children?
We really had no idea how our children would react. And we thought we could guess, but really until you bring the first placement into the home, you really don't know. And as I said, my twins were 9 years old when we started, and we started with a set of 9-month-old twins, and that was just the perfect age difference. We definitely wanted to foster children who were significantly younger than ours for a variety of reasons. But you know, some people have great success in fostering older teens when their kids are young, and that works out great for them. But actually, one of my daughters chose, she had an open-ended writing assignment for English in the 5th grade for her English class, and she chose to write about fostering. And she wrote this beautiful essay, and it was really heartwarming for us as parents to see that. And it was just affirming of our decision and that it can be a positive experience. And what I've learned in talking to people about fostering, folks who seem pretty serious that, you know, they do intend to foster one day, it seems they all have some connection to fostering or some exposure to fostering as a child. And I think that really represents the fact that exposure to fostering can have a lifelong impact, not only on the foster children, but on your biological children as well. Somebody may have had a neighbor who fostered and they have positive memories of that, or their grandmother fostered and they have positive memories of these children who they met throughout the years. And oftentimes that just plants a seed for us when we're young. And actually, it never occurred to me until about a year in to fostering, but when I was very young, my mother took in pregnant teens, several pregnant teens over the years, and it was not in a formal foster setting, But it's just these women needed, or younger, these girls needed a place to stay while they were pregnant. And my mother opened our home to them. And I was too young to remember any of that. But of course, I've heard the stories over the years. And about a year into fostering, I thought, aha, perhaps that planted this hidden seed so many years ago, and it just made sense. My husband says, let's consider fostering. And that idea kind of meshed with the values that I was raised with.
Yeah. And the final one, the final barrier, or the most one of the most common barriers we hear, and Sara and I have talked a lot about this, is people saying, "Well, what if I get too attached? Wouldn't it just be so hard to say goodbye to these kids once you fall in love with them, once you're sharing your home with them, once you're sharing your life with them?" Um, and yeah, it might be hard. It might be hard to say goodbye, um, but it's not just hard. It's also joyful when you know you have accomplished your goal, of caring for them in the gap, of caring for them until they get to return home. You have really done some hard work in providing love and care and healing for them, resources and opportunities, and now they get to go back to their parents or a family member, and there really is joy in that, especially like what Sara said, you've built a relationship with their biological family. When you have that connection, and maybe there is opportunity for ongoing contact, there are lots of very beautiful stories, of reunifications just being something really special, something to be celebrated.
What
And
I
yes,
like to tell people, Kaylee, is yes, goodbye is a big part of fostering, but it's not the biggest part. That good stuff in the middle, that is what's important, and that's why we do it. And if adults, I think adults in society should be willing to take on a chance of heartbreak as an opportunity to decrease heartbreak for these kids. We
mhm.
adults need to step up and do the hard stuff.
Yeah. And you do fall in love with these kids, and we say it all the time. Love does hard things. You have likely said goodbye to somebody before, and it was probably really hard, but you have developed skills to be resilient, and to process the hard and to move forward and be stronger for it. So, yes, there are hard things about fostering, and some of those things might be true barriers for you that maybe right now are unable to be overcome, but maybe in the future they could be. So there are lots of reasons to have hard conversations and really think about your motivations, for considering foster care. Um, but we would love the chance to talk to you about those things if those are things that you are still worried about. So, of course, like we've been talking about, if you don't know anything about foster care, it can feel very daunting to jump into the deep end, without really having all of your questions answered. And of course, there are so many unique situations and stories and your backgrounds. But we're going to try and answer some of the most common questions about fostering, just really generally. And the first is, can I afford to foster? And Sara, I don't know about you, but I know for us that was a legitimate question. Just not knowing, without having lots of disposable income, could we add a child or children to our family? Could we take on those costs? And the answer most often in most situations is yes. There's no minimum income required for fostering, but you do need to prove that you have enough money coming in every month to cover your basic bills, and that an additional person in the home isn't going to put too much burden on you financially. Of course, there are financial assistance available for foster parents, that are caring for children in their home. There is a stipend, or what's called a board payment, that's paid to the foster family each month, to cover the essentials of caring for that child. And that covers basic food and clothes, shelter, maybe some extracurricular activities. So there is some financial assistance available. If you work full time, there's ABC vouchers to help cover the cost of daycare daycare. I think one of the biggest expenses that families consider is, well, are they going to have to go on my health insurance? Am I going to have to pay the cost of their medical bills? And as soon as a child enters foster care, they are assigned a Medicaid number. So the foster family is not paying out of pocket for these large expenses, doctor's visits, medications, counseling, and things like that. Now, one of the things that I do share with families up front is that there likely will be some things you're paying out of pocket for up front that may be reimbursed or may not. For example, if a child comes to your home in the middle of the night and they haven't brought any clothing with them, you might need to run to the store and grab some clothes or some diapers or formula or school supplies. There are clothing vouchers every quarter for children in care, but you might have to front that money until that clothing voucher is allotted and is paid out to you. So most families can afford fostering, but there are some stipulations around that. Can I work full time in foster? Yes, definitely. Working parents, dual career couples, or single working parents make great foster parents. But just like anybody, you really need to think critically about your support system and how you're going to manage an additional child in your home. What is the flexibility of your work schedule for taking time off for appointments or visits and things like that? So just evaluating what is your flexibility, and is this reasonable to add to your plate? Can I be single and foster? And the answer is yes. Single parents make awesome foster parents for so many reasons. They really thrive, and we know so many really truly wonderful single foster parents. But again, evaluate your support system. Consider where you might need to be flexible, where you might need to ask for help. What are the things that might be additionally challenging for you doing this on your own? But single foster parents often thrive. Do I have to own a home? No, foster parents live in all kinds of living situations, apartments, condos, townhouses, houses that you rent or own. There are lots of options for you. Sara, can you think of any common questions or maybe questions that you had when you were getting started?
Not that you haven't covered, other than just the basics of the licensing process and what that involves. And that's background checks, safety checks of your home, a fire inspection. You may need to add some smoke detectors or a fire extinguisher. Make sure there's one that's active in your kitchen. Those types of things. But that was a really scary thing for me because I didn't know. It seemed like a lot. And it really wasn't. It really wasn't difficult.
Yeah. And that's what we're going to talk about now, is that licensing process. So again, you are going to want to connect directly with an agency to find out the specifics of their program's process. Now, the process is going to look very similar, regardless of the agency that you choose, but they may have a different order that they do it, or they may just do things a specific way. So those are great questions to ask. When you're choosing an agency, what does your licensing process look like? What can I really expect? Now, we're going to go through the process as an overview, just kind of some general things about the licensing process. But I do want to note that there recently has been a change as of July 2020 in how foster care licensing happens, because currently DSS, or the state, is not currently licensing non-relative homes. So what this means is DSS is no longer an option if you are a non-relative foster family. You're going to need to identify a private agency that you want to work with. It will be a very similar licensing process, but this is good news because really the state is going to use their capacity, their focus, their resources to find and recruit and license kinship, which means relatives of the child, or close family friends, people the child already has an ongoing relationship with, because those are the where they're going to be able to maintain those family bonds that are so crucial.
The
So
other piece of good news from that is that working through a licensing agency is just an additional layer of support for those foster parents.
yes. Private agencies have a larger capacity to provide one-on-one care, to walk you through the process once you are licensed, to provide that additional support. So you want to really think critically about your licensing agency. What is the support that they offer? What does that look like? And you could compare that as you're making decisions. So early decisions. You're ready to start fostering. You're so excited. What do you do first? Well, you want to do your research. This is not a small decision. It can be life changing for your family. So you want to think through the steps. And we always say the first step is to choose between regular or standard foster care and therapeutic foster care. So, regular foster care is where your typical child is going to enter foster care. Of course, each of these children have experienced some type of trauma, possibly abuse or neglect. So, there may be behaviors that need to be worked with, maybe providers, appointments that need to be put into place, a plan for the child. Maybe there's just been not diagnosed conditions that need to be evaluated. But therapeutic foster care is simply for children who are going to need a higher level of care, whether that is medical, physical, social, behavioral. There's some identified challenges that this child has that need to be addressed with a higher level of care. So you can choose standard, which is where most families start. Or you can choose therapeutic, where maybe you have a passion for serving children with the highest needs. Or maybe you have experience as a nurse, a doctor, working with special education. Those might be good reasons that you'd be a good fit for therapeutic foster care. But that's your first decision, because those are two separate processes. You're going to look at your standard agencies or your therapeutic agencies. Now, there are some that do both, so you could decide what type of license you want. But deciding regular or therapeutic is a good place to start, because then you can really try and find your best fit agency. And like Sara said, these private agencies offer incredible support. So it is not about finding the best agency. It's about finding the agency that's going to be the best fit for you. So talk to other foster families, do your research, call us at Care to Foster. We're happy to walk you through all of your options. We've got a map on our website where you can choose your county and see all the options available to you. But really, like most things, talking to foster families that are working with those agencies already is going to be the best indicator of if that is a good fit for you. Because there are many, many great options in South Carolina. So like Sara said, the basic process, you're going to start by choosing standard or therapeutic, connecting with an agency. You're going to apply directly with that private agency, and then they're going to talk to you through their process, and they're going to walk you through that so you know what to expect. There's going to be a series of appointments that need to be scheduled, lots of paperwork that needs to be done. I see the recommendation so often, and I stand by it. As you're filling out that paperwork, make sure you scan it, hold on to a copy so that you can have access to those records. You're going to have a series of home visits, both from your licensing agency as well as a health and safety inspection from the state fire marshal. And once your agency has decided that your packet is complete, they will submit it to DSS state office, where you will then receive your official license. And then it's just a matter of waiting for that first placement call. Sara, how long did your licensing process take?
Once we actually started the licensing process, it was just 3 months. Yeah, it was 4 months from the very first time I ever picked up the phone and called DSS to inquire and show interest. And it was really within that first month that we got started and attended the orientation session and that sort of thing. So really 3 months was a very smooth process for us. We were lucky.
Yeah, it was about 5 months for us, and we hit a couple of roadblocks. And a lot of those things in the licensing process have changed. There's no longer a lead paint inspection, which is we failed that first inspection, and we had to remediate that before we could move on. But DSS is seeing that the typical licensing time is about 120, 125 days. And so we typically say to expect between 3 to 6 months. Now, of course, with COVID, there may be some transitions happening. There may be some delays in some parts of the process, but those are all things that can be overcome. And just being open and honest with your licensing worker, talking through that, asking questions is always recommended. All right. So you've gotten started. You've chose your agency. You've filled out an application. You're going through the process. Um, that's not the end of the challenge. You really are going to need to find support as a new foster parent, and Sara has some ways that she's going to recommend, and we'll go ahead and follow up with some other ways as well. But Sara, as a new foster parent, what kind of support did you need?
I think the first, I just needed to talk to people who have been there, done that, right? And so my local foster parent association was a great way to meet people, have the opportunity to talk. During this pandemic, some of those association meetings are happening virtually, which is wonderful. So we haven't lost contact with those important people. There are also private Facebook groups for the local association, depending on what county you're in, but also other private Facebook groups specific to fostering. There's also you were talking about expenses earlier and upfront expenses, Kaylee. And there are local foster closets who will give to you for free clothing and shoes and some diapers and some wipes and that sort of thing. But also they have the larger equipment that you can borrow. So we borrowed a crib, we borrowed a second car seat, we borrowed a high chair. And all the large equipment. You don't have to, they have all sorts of equipment and toys. So you don't have to invest upfront on all of those things. Certainly we were thrifty and bought a lot of things on consignment if we did have to pay for it. So there's great support there from local foster closets. There's a local church in my community that is now women in that community, I assume it's mostly women, are fixing meals and giving them to foster families, frozen meals for free, which is just wonderful support, especially when you have a new placement in the home. And there simply isn't enough time in the day to handle all the details in the beginning. But also, since this pandemic started, we are part of a virtual support group that's been meeting weekly. And that's been a great opportunity for me to meet women from across the state who otherwise, I may come across on social media occasionally, but it's really given me an opportunity to get to know this group of women really closely, really well. We can dig deep into some serious topics related to fostering. It's been really important support for me and very, very beneficial, especially during this challenging time.
Yeah. So I'll just reiterate what Sara said. Always the first place I send people is to their local foster parent association. Connect with the president, find out more about when they meet, what they offer. You can find all the information about your local foster parent association on the South Carolina Foster Parent Association website at scfpa.com. Of course, Sara is wearing her beautiful Share Fostering shirt. We would love for you to join our Share Fostering community. It's about 1,000 current and prospective foster parents from across the state that simply join together to ask questions, share resources, find support, and build community. We share lots of resources within that group, and we would love for you to join. Yes.
Also, the care2foster.org website is a
Yeah.
great source of information. There are blog posts on every topic you could consider when you're first starting out with the decision-making process.
Yeah.
A
And
lot of
just like
other great
you said,
information on that website.
so much support is just learning from people's experiences, learning from stuff that's available on the internet, whether that's blogs or podcasts or videos, whatever it may be. You know, start doing some intentional learning. Reading books. There's great books available for foster parents. There's great books about introducing foster care to your children. There are so many just really exciting resources out there. So you might be thinking, okay, that all sounds great, but there's still this thing, there's this barrier, whatever it may be in my life, where I just can't foster, or I can't foster right now, or there's this thing that's holding me back. Well, everyone can do something. There's a role for each of us. There is room at the table. There is a desperate need for mentors and tutors for school age and teenage youth in care, building relationships and offering them your time and attention. Maybe you can't become a foster parent, but a guardian ad litem or a casa is a great fit for you. So those are volunteer roles where you really are the voice of the child in court. So just like there is a desperate need in every county for more foster parents, there is also a desperate need for more guardians and CASA volunteers. Of course, just spending time with foster families, getting connected, learning what they need for support. Like Sara said, a meal. Maybe it's just encouragement. Maybe it's sitting with them in long doctor's appointments or in court on court days to just be that extra support for them. There are so many things you can do. And just think about your own time, talent, and resources. Can you cut their yard for them once a month so that they just have that little bit of extra time to spend together as a family? Can you take their child out to ice cream or offer them a little dinner date where you're willing to watch their kids? There are so many ways that you can just be a huge support, a light to that family or to those children. You gotta do something, and sometimes you gotta start by asking, what is it? What do you need? I want to do something.
A
Sarah.
common question that I get is, do I have to be licensed to babysit a child in care, or to offer respite, even overnight, several nights? And the truth is, no, you do not need to be licensed to offer respite care to a foster family, to care for these kids. And so that's a great way to offer support to foster families. It's just offer to babysit, offer to give them a break, or even if there's more than one child in the home, offer to take some of the kids and give them some time apart, or watch some of the kids so that the parent doesn't have to take all of the children to a doctor's appointment. Or something like that. That's a great way you can help. Another thing, Kaylee, that I did when we were starting to talk about fostering is I immediately applied to volunteer at a local group home here in my county. And that was a great experience. I was able to spend time with those kids, really learn. I participated in some training there, and just picked the brain of the director there, and asked a lot of questions and learned everything that I could. So it was a win-win, right? I was gaining all this great insight and information and getting a lot of questions answered. But I was also an important resource to them at a time when they needed it. And these local foster homes, they have a variety of needs. It's everything from, delivering a birthday cake on a child's birthday, or taking a child out for a special birthday dinner down at McDonald's, or anything different. They also need help with homework. group homes care for kids at a variety of different educational levels and ages. And a lot of times the house parents are not able to help with all of the homework every day. And so just sitting with the kids and helping with homework, even if it's not a formal tutoring session, but just being there available to help the kids get through their homework is a huge need in the local foster homes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sara. And thank you for all of you who are still here with us. We are so grateful for your time. Sara and I would both love to connect with you, learn a little bit more about you and the questions that you have. Of course, you can join us at caretofoster.org or on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. But as you have questions, just reach out and we want to make sure that we're connecting with you. So thank you so much, Sara, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.